Every dream recorded in the Bible, from the first to the last, explained in order. From Jacob to Pilate, more than 20 dreams in total, scattered between Genesis and the New Testament. Some change the destiny of empires, others decide the birth of a Messiah. There are dreams of pagans, dreams of patriarchs, dreams of prophets, dreams of a poor carpenter from Galilee. And all of them have one thing in common: nobody asked to dream. One, Abimelech, the pagan king. The story is in Genesis chapter 20, and here the Bible already establishes a surprise right from the start. The first dream recorded in the entire Old Testament is not given to a patriarch. It is not given to a priest. It is given to a pagan. Abraham is traveling through the south. He arrives in Gerar, and out of fear, he pretends Sarah is his sister and not his wife. Abimelech, the king of the place, sends for Sarah to bring her to the harem. At night, God comes to Abimelech in a dream and speaks directly. "You are a dead man because of the woman you have taken." Abimelech wakes up frozen with fear. He returns Sarah immediately. He even gives gifts to appease Abraham. The Hebrew word used here is shalom. It appears 65 times in the Old Testament. It comes from the root shalom, and shalom has a strange feature in Hebrew. It means two things at the same time: to dream and to be healed, to be strong. To the ancient Hebrew mind, dream and life force were linguistically intertwined. Dreaming was not a random nightmare. It was being visited. It was receiving something from outside. And that is exactly what happens with Abimelech. He receives something from outside, without warning, without seeking it. And God speaks to him without an intermediary, without a prophet, without a symbolic vision that needs interpretation. It is a conversation. This already establishes a pattern that will return many times. When God wants to speak to a pagan, he often uses dreams. Pharaoh will have a dream. Nebuchadnezzar will have a dream. The Magi from the east will have a dream. Pilate's wife will have a dream. It is as if dreams were God's back door for those outside the covenant. The text does not give more detail than that, and we won't force anything more either. It was a conversation, it was a threat, it worked. 2. Jacob at Bethel. Here we arrive at the most famous dream of the Old Testament. It is in Genesis chapter 28. Jacob is fleeing from his brother Esau after having stolen his father's blessing. He leaves Beersheba alone, with only the clothes on his back. When the sun sets, he stops at some random place along the way. He picks up a stone, he rests his head on it, he sleeps, and he dreams. The text describes it in Genesis 28 verse 12 like this: "And behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it." The word translated as ladder here is sulam, and sulam is interesting for a precise reason. It appears only once in the entire Hebrew Bible. Once. No other Old Testament text uses this word. It comes from a root that carries the idea of piling up, raising, forming a ramp. That is why many understand it is not exactly a ladder of steps. It is a ramp, a wide staircase, the kind that existed in a Mesopotamian ziggurat. And this image fits very well with the historical background. A ziggurat is that step tower of ancient Mesopotamia with an internal staircase that was understood in the ancient world as a point of communication between heaven and earth. The peoples of the region built these towers to climb up to where the gods dwelled. It was a human project, from bottom to top. The Genesis scene becomes a direct response to this worldview. The point of contact between heaven and earth is not a tower that man builds. It is some random place along the way, some random stone serving as a pillow, and God who descends on his own initiative, from top to bottom. Jacob wakes up frightened and says a phrase in Genesis 28 verse 17 that is worth remembering. "This is the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." And the story becomes even more interesting many centuries later, because Jesus, talking to a disciple named Nathanael in John chapter 1, verse 51, says a phrase that quotes this dream directly: "You shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." The angels ascending and descending. Same image, same phrase. Except now, the ladder is not a ramp, it is not a ziggurat. The ladder is a person. Jesus is saying, in other words, that the point of contact between heaven and earth that Jacob saw in his dream was him. That entire scene at Bethel of the gate of heaven was an early announcement. 3. Jacob and the speckled goats. This dream is less famous. It is in Genesis chapter 31. Jacob has been living with his father-in-law Laban for over 20 years. The relationship has soured. Laban's sons are looking at him sideways. Then Jacob tells his wives Leah and Rachel about a dream he had received. In the dream, God shows him that the goats mating in the flock are the speckled, the striped, the spotted ones, and he tells Jacob to return to the land of his fathers. And on that same night, God makes a second appearance in a dream within the narrative, now to another person. Laban goes after Jacob to bring him back by force. Before catching up, he receives a warning in Genesis chapter 31, verse 24. "Take heed that you speak not to Jacob, either good or bad." Laban respects the warning. He has a civil conversation when he catches up. He lets Jacob go. Did you notice the pattern? God uses the dream here for two things at the same time: to guide Jacob in making a decision about his route, and to tie Laban's hand so that he does not interfere. A dream is not just a revelation of the future, it is an active instrument of protection. 4. Joseph, the teenage dreamer. Genesis chapter 37. Here begins a dream arc that will take 13 years to be fulfilled. Joseph is 17 years old. He is his father's favorite son. He already has that tunic that his brothers hate. And then he has two dreams in a row. In the first one, Joseph and his brothers are binding sheaves of wheat in the field. His sheaf rises up in the middle. The brothers' sheaves gather around and bow down before it. He tells them. The brothers ask sarcastically, "Will you indeed reign over us?" The hatred grows. In the second one, it is even bolder. He sees the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down before him. He tells them again, now with his father present. Jacob rebukes him loud and clear. "Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the ground before you?" But the text says in Genesis 37 verse 11 that the father kept the matter in his heart. And why two almost identical dreams, the text does not explain, but the effect is clear. It marks Joseph. It marks the father. And it locks everyone into a mechanism that no one controls. The brothers sell Joseph as a slave to the Ishmaelites. He goes down to Egypt. He ends up in Potiphar's house. He ends up in prison because of Potiphar's wife. All of this because of two dreams he never even asked for. But the mechanism does not stop, because it is precisely in prison that the next dream appears, and the next, and the next. Until Joseph rises to the position of second in command in Egypt 13 years later, at 30 years of age. 5. The cupbearer and the baker. Genesis chapter 40. Joseph is in prison then, because of Potiphar's wife. Two officials of Pharaoh fall out of favor and end up in the same prison. The chief of the cupbearers and the chief of the bakers. On the same night, both of them dream. Both wake up disturbed. Joseph asks what happened. Both of them tell him. The cupbearer dreamed of a vine, 3 branches, grapes that he pressed into Pharaoh's cup. The baker dreamed of 3 white baskets on his head, birds coming to eat the bread from the top basket. And here a linguistic detail appears that changes how we read the scene. Joseph interprets the 2 dreams using a Hebrew expression that is an exact pun. To the cupbearer he says in Genesis 40 verse 13, Pharaoh shall lift up your head and restore you to your office. To the baker in Genesis 40 verse 19, Pharaoh shall lift up your head from off you. The same phrase in Hebrew, nasarosh, to lift up the head. To the cupbearer it means promotion. To the baker it means decapitation. This is the way the ancient world interpreted dreams, sound puns, words that carried two meanings tied together by sound. The dream interpreters of Egypt and Mesopotamia used exactly this method. Joseph does the same, except with the wisdom that he credits to God. 3 days later, it is Pharaoh's birthday. The cupbearer is restored. The baker is hanged. Joseph had predicted it exactly right. Right day, right fate. And this precision is what will open the next door. 6. The two dreams of Pharaoh, Genesis chapter 41. Pharaoh dreams twice in the same night. In the first one, he is standing on the bank of the Nile. 7 fat cows come out of the water and start grazing. Then 7 other cows come out, skinny, ugly, withered, and they devour the fat ones. But the strange thing is that they remain skinny after eating. They keep the same ugliness. In the second one, 7 full ears on a single stalk of wheat. Then 7 shriveled ears, scorched by the east wind, devour the full ones. The east wind in Hebrew is kadim. It is the sirocco wind, a dry wind that came from the desert and burned an entire harvest in a single night. The listener of the ancient world understood the code immediately. East wind equals famine. And why twice? Why 2 different dreams on the same night with the same warning? Joseph will answer that when he interprets. Pharaoh wakes up disturbed. He summons all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. No one can interpret. And here a narrative pattern appears that will repeat itself later with Nebuchadnezzar, and that will echo all the way into the New Testament. A pagan king has a disturbing dream. The court magicians fail to interpret. A foreign Hebrew interprets with God's help and rises to the highest position in the kingdom. This pattern Matthew will imitate on purpose almost 2,000 years later, with the Magi of the East guided by dreams to Christ. But that is a topic for later in this video. The cupbearer remembers Joseph in prison. He sends for him. Joseph interprets directly in Genesis 41 verse 25. The 2 dreams of Pharaoh are one. 7 years of abundance, 7 of famine, and the famine will devour the abundance. The dream was duplicated, Joseph explains, because the matter has been established by God, and God hastens to bring it to pass. Repetition as a seal. Repetition as urgency. Joseph also gives advice on governance. Stockpile 1/5 of what is produced in the good years. Pharaoh places the royal ring on his finger. Joseph is 30 years old, 13 years after that night when he dreamed of sheaves of wheat bowing down. 7. Gideon's barley loaf, Judges chapter 7. Here something unique happens in the Old Testament, the only dream of the OT that is not received by an Israelite, the only one that is not interpreted by a prophet. It is Gideon eavesdropping on the enemy's dream. Gideon has 300 men about to attack the Midianite army, which is gigantic. God tells him to go down secretly to the edge of the Midianite camp to hear what they are saying. Gideon arrives, and he hears one soldier telling another a dream he had had that night. In Judges 7 verse 13. A loaf of barley bread came rolling through the camp of Midian, struck the tent, and turned it upside down. The other soldier interprets immediately. This is nothing else but the sword of Gideon. God has delivered Midian into his hand. Gideon hears everything. He worships God right there in the dark, in silence. He returns to the 300 with the courage he had been lacking. There is a sound detail in this image that reinforces the interpretation. Barley in Hebrew is seorim. It was the cheapest grain. It was the bread of the poor, food for those who did not have wheat. Israel was seen by the Midianites exactly as a barley loaf, a poor people, a people from nowhere, and nothing came rolling, struck the tent, and the tent fell completely. Did you notice the irony? God convinces the leader of his own army through the nightmare of an anonymous soldier from the enemy army. Gideon did not need his own dream. He needed to hear someone else's dream, and this is the only time the Bible does this. 8. Solomon at Gibeon. 1 Kings chapter 3. Solomon has just been enthroned. He is young. He must be around 20 years old. He goes up to Gibeon to offer 1,000 sacrifices on the ancient altar. At night, after all the liturgy, he goes to sleep, and God appears in a dream. The question comes directly in 1 Kings 3 verse 5. Ask what I shall give you. A blank check. Solomon can ask for whatever he wants. Wealth, long life, the heads of his enemies on a platter. Solomon asks for a Hebrew expression that is worth gold. Lev Shomeah, a listening heart. In English, we usually translate it as wise heart or understanding, but the Hebrew is more beautiful, a heart that knows how to listen. Solomon does not ask to be intelligent. He asks for the sensitivity to listen when someone arrives with a difficult case. God likes the answer so much that he gives the rest as a bonus: wealth, honor, long life, all for free, because the request was the right one. Did you notice the detail? This is the only dream in the Bible in which God asks before speaking. In all the others, God descends with his own agenda. Here, heaven opens a slot and lets the man decide what to ask for. And the test is exactly that. What do you ask for when you can ask for anything? Solomon asked for a listening heart, and he entered history as the wisest king of the ancient world. 9. Nebuchadnezzar and the statue. Daniel chapter 2. Skip about 400 years after Solomon. The kingdom of Judah has ended. Jerusalem has fallen. The most powerful king of the known world is Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar has a dream that costs him his sleep. But here there is a twist that no one expects. Nebuchadnezzar summons the magicians of Babylon, and instead of telling them the dream and asking for an interpretation, he demands that the magicians tell him the dream, without a hint, without a clue. Tell me what I dreamed and what it means, or I will have everyone killed. The magicians protest in Daniel 2 verse 11. There is no one on earth who can do this. And it is true. In all the ancient world, a dream interpreter depended on the client telling the dream first. Their method was symbolic analysis of described elements. Without description, no work. Nebuchadnezzar is asking the impossible. Daniel hears the death sentence. He asks for time. He goes with his 3 friends to pray. And on that same night, God reveals everything to Daniel in a night vision. The dream and the interpretation together. The statue is gigantic, head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, feet of iron mixed with clay. A stone descends without being cut by human hand, strikes the feet, and the entire statue turns to dust. The stone grows and fills the whole earth. Daniel interprets each part as one empire succeeding another. Babylon, then another kingdom, then another, then a divided kingdom. And in the end, a kingdom that God raises up, that is not given to another people, and that crushes all the others. The stone that becomes a mountain is that kingdom. Did you notice what God is doing here? Nebuchadnezzar is the most powerful man in the world, and God shows him in a dream that his kingdom is just a head of gold, and it is going to fall. And the kingdom that comes last is not built by any emperor. It is a stone that descends from above, from top to bottom. The same pattern as Jacob's ladder at Bethel, centuries earlier. 10. The tree of Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel chapter 4. The same Nebuchadnezzar, now older, dreams again. He sees a huge tree in the middle of the earth. The top reaches the sky. The fruits feed all the animals, birds dwell in its branches, and then a figure descends that the text calls, in Daniel 4 verse 13, a holy watcher. It orders the tree to be cut down. Leave only the trunk bound with bands of iron and bronze, and let the heart of the owner be changed from the heart of a man to the heart of an animal for 7 times. Daniel interprets it with sadness. The tree is Nebuchadnezzar himself. He will lose his reason for 7 times. He will live in the field like a beast. He will eat grass like an ox, until he acknowledges that the Most High is the one who rules. And what happened was fulfilled exactly. 12 months later, Nebuchadnezzar was on the palace terrace, admiring the glory of the Babylon he had built. He said a phrase of pure pride, and immediately the sentence fell. 7 times in the field, hair grew like eagle feathers, nails like a bird's claws. When he came back to his senses, he himself wrote the testimony. It is there in Daniel chapter 4, something unique in the Bible, an entire chapter written in the first person by a pagan king, telling about his own collapse and ending with praise to God. 11. Daniel and the 4 beasts, Daniel chapter 7. Now it is the prophet who dreams, no longer the king. Daniel sees 4 beasts coming out of the sea. A lion with eagle's wings, a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, and a 4th beast so strange that the text does not even give it a name. It only says that it had 10 horns, iron teeth, and was different from all the others. Anyone who has heard of the apocalypse will recognize these beasts. John takes up these same images there in Revelation chapter 13, except John combines everything into a single beast, 10 horns, 7 heads, with parts of leopard, bear, and lion. It is the same symbolic mechanism of Daniel, reorganized for the last book of the Bible. And in the middle of Daniel's dream, after the beasts, a figure appears that he describes carefully. In Daniel 7, verse 13, "Behold, there came with the clouds of heaven one like the Son of Man." Son of Man in Aramaic here is Bar Enash. It simply means human being. But the Son of Man that Daniel sees comes on the clouds of heaven and receives dominion, glory, and a kingdom over all peoples, and his dominion does not pass away. This title, Son of Man, is the one Jesus uses most often to speak about himself in the Gospels, more than 80 times. Every time Jesus says the Son of Man, he is pointing to this dream of Daniel, to the figure who receives the kingdom that does not pass away. 12. Joseph, the husband of Mary, skip almost 600 years. Arrive at the New Testament. Matthew chapter 1. Mary is pregnant and Joseph has not yet married her. By Jewish custom, this is death by stoning. Joseph is described as a righteous man, and for that reason he decides to divorce her secretly so as not to cause a scandal. And at night, before making the decision, he receives an angel in a dream. The phrase is in Matthew 1 verse 20. Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife. Notice 2 things here. First, the angel calls Joseph the son of David. It is not a casual compliment. Matthew is stitching the entire gospel together to show that Jesus is the legitimate heir of the throne of David. And in ancient law, that throne was passed down through the legal father, not the biological father. So the dream is not just personal comfort, it is the legal act that grafts Jesus into the royal line. Second, the Greek verb that Matthew uses for to take is paralabin. It is a technical verb for taking into one's home, assuming legal responsibility for someone. Joseph is not just being convinced to marry, he is being instructed to perform an act of public adoption. And here a sequence will begin. 4 dreams in a row to the same Joseph, the only character in the entire Bible who receives 4 dreams in continuous narrative, all short, all direct, all to protect the child. 13. The Magi from the East. Matthew chapter 2. The Magi arrive in Jerusalem asking where the King of the Jews has been born. Herod hears, becomes troubled, pretends to be interested, tells the Magi to return and report where they found the child. The Magi go, find him, worship him, give gold, frankincense, myrrh. And then, in Matthew 2 verse 12, the phrase comes, "And being warned by divine revelation in dreams not to return to Herod, they departed for their own country by another way." The Greek word here is krematisthentes, a verb used for an oracle, for a formal divine warning. It is not a suggestion. It is an official communication. And did you notice the pattern repeating? Foreign, pagan, dream, warning from God. The same scheme as Abimelech back at the beginning, as Pharaoh, as Nebuchadnezzar. The Magi from the east fall into the same line of pagans, visited by dreams. Matthew is sewing this symmetry together on purpose. 14. Flee to Egypt, right after the Magi leave, in Matthew 2 verse 13. Behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Arise, take the young child and his mother, flee to Egypt." Herod is going to order the killing of all the children of Bethlehem. They have to leave that same night. Joseph obeys without questioning. He gets up in the middle of the dark, takes Mary and Jesus, sets out on the road to Egypt. The journey takes weeks. They will cross the desert with a baby in arms, carrying only what fits on an animal, and what protected that route was a dream. 15. Return from Egypt. Matthew 2 verse 19. Herod dies. Joseph receives a third dream. Arise, take the young child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for they are dead who sought the young child's life. He leaves Egypt, the same route back. 16. Go to Galilee. Matthew 2 verse 22. Halfway back, Joseph discovers that Archelaus, son of Herod, is reigning in his father's place in Judea. Archelaus was known for his violence. Joseph becomes afraid to return to Bethlehem, and in a dream he receives instructions to go to Galilee. He ends up settling in Nazareth, up north, far from the capital. 4 dreams, 4 logistical decisions: marry, flee, return, change region. Each of these decisions would save or lose the child's life. Matthew shows that the entire childhood of Jesus, from his parents' marriage to the final address in Nazareth, was guided night by night through dreams. There is no audible voice in broad daylight. There is no pillar of fire. There is no prophet preaching in the square. It is an angel in a dream, talking to a poor carpenter from Galilee whom no one knew. 17. Pilate's wife. Matthew chapter 27. It is the last dream recorded in the entire Bible, and it is given to a woman whom the text does not even name. Later tradition will call her Claudia Procula, but Matthew only says Pilate's wife. Pilate is sitting on the judgment seat. Jesus is standing in front of him, being judged. And in the middle of the trial, in Matthew 27 verse 19, the wife sends a message: "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him." Think about the geometry of this scene. The representative of the most powerful empire on earth is about to sentence Jesus, and the one trying to stop him is his wife, from the palace, sending a note about a poorly slept night. The weight of the decision is in the husband's hands, but the warning came to the wife. The Greek word that Matthew uses for "I have suffered many things" is epithon pola, pathos, intense suffering. The woman did not have a comforting dream. She had a violent nightmare. She woke up distressed enough to interrupt a public trial. And there is a symmetry worth noting. The first dream of the Bible, back in Genesis 20, was given to a pagan king, Abimelech, to prevent him from harming a righteous man. The last dream of the Bible, now in Matthew 27, is given to the wife of a pagan governor to try to prevent him from harming the righteous one. Same function. A pagan receiving a warning, an attempt to save the life of the innocent. Except this time, it does not work. Pilate receives the note. He reads it, he washes his hands, he hands Jesus over. The woman's dream enters history as the last divine alert that the Roman Empire received and ignored. And here the book closes. More than 20 dreams, scattered across nearly 2,000 years of narrative, kings, slaves, prophets, pagans, carpenters, anonymous wives, all of them visited without having asked, all of them confronted with something that came from outside themselves. Notice the thread that stitches everything together. A dream in the Bible is never man ascending up to God. It is always God descending down to man. When he wants to stop an injustice in Gerar, he sends a dream. When he wants to show a fleeing patriarch that heaven is not empty, he sends a dream. When he wants to move an entire family from Egypt to Canaan, he sends a dream. When he wants to warn a foreign king that his kingdom has an expiration date, he sends a dream. When he wants to give a root to a poor carpenter to protect a child, he sends a dream. And that is why that detail of the Hebrew word, shalom, back at the beginning of this video makes so much sense. Dream and strength in the same root. Because in the biblical vision, being dreamed by God does not weaken anyone. It strengthens, it heals what was crooked, it resolves what was stuck, it saves what was about to be lost. There is another thing that appears when we look at the entire picture. The dreams do not choose by position. They go to a king and they go to a slave. They go to a patriarch and they go to a public official's wife. They go to a Babylonian court interpreter and they go to an anonymous soldier in the Midianite camp. There is no resume. There is no accumulated merit. In every case, the dream comes for free, and what decides the outcome is what the dreamer does when he wakes up. Pharaoh wakes up and stockpiles grain. He saves Egypt from famine. Nebuchadnezzar wakes up and ignores the warning. He turns into a beast in the field for 7 times. Joseph, back in the Old Testament, wakes up and crosses 13 years of imprisonment until the dream is fulfilled. Joseph, in the New, wakes up and lifts the family in the dark to flee to Egypt. Pilate receives the warning through his wife's hands, washes his hands, and hands Jesus over. The difference between Abimelech and Pilate was not the dream. It was what each one did when he woke up. Abimelech got up and returned Sarah. Pilate washed his hands and handed over the righteous one. Same God, same format of warning, opposite responses. And maybe that is why the Bible records so many dreams in order, without sparing detail. It is not to teach anyone how to interpret nightmares. It is to show, chapter after chapter, that there is a voice that keeps descending the ladder of Bethel, coming from top to bottom, speaking to those who are not even searching. It was that way with Abimelech on the first page of Genesis. It continued that way with Pilate's wife at the end of Matthew. And the invitation that each of these stories leaves is the simplest possible. When the voice arrives, what will you do when you wake up? If this video showed you something you had not yet stopped to notice, share it with someone who would also like to see it. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed yet. We will see each other in the next one.